Today, you'll get to learn the ultimate blueprint for finding multi-million dollar A/B test ideas for your direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand. Now, you'll learn quite a few things, but the whole goal of this is to help you accelerate, and I mean significantly accelerate customer acquisition through A/B testing. You'll learn today how to identify what's not working in your e-commerce funnel and then how to fix it through testing. You'll also learn how to stop wasting time running a bunch of test ideas that ultimately don't really do anything or grow your business. You'll know how to find the right test ideas, how to consistently get wins from your test, and ultimately, all of that combined will help you increase e-commerce sales, reduce acquisition, improve conversions, and ultimately will accelerate customer acquisition so you can grow your e-commerce brand. But you're probably wondering, why should you listen to me? Well, I'm Raphael, and I'm the founder and CEO of Splitbase, and we've grown some of the most successful brands in D2C through CRO. I'm talking about brands like Dr. Squatch, Amica, Kiehl's, Bones Coffee, Diff Eyewear, and so many more. We have over 10 years of e-commerce and A/B testing experience, which means we're one of the oldest e-commerce optimization agency in the direct-to-consumer space. But now here's the deal. Here's how most people think about A/B testing, and here's why it's flawed. Okay, if we just zoom out for a second, and we actually look at how testing is supposed to work, you'll notice this. This is what we call the testing trifecta. And you can clearly see that testing is supported by analytics and by human. And well, that's not a coincidence. Now, before I explain how that works and why it's not a coincidence, let's just think about how a lot of people are finding their test ideas these days. If you spend a lot of time on Twitter or on LinkedIn, right, or even just Googling or on ChatGPT, what you might be finding is, well, there's a lot of people just posting templates of test ideas, right? So on Google, you'll find blog articles with hundreds of A/B test ideas to run for your e-commerce store. On LinkedIn, you'll find lists of 100 proven A/B tests to run on your e-commerce store. On Twitter, you'll get the same thing. 100 tests to run on your e-commerce store that's proven and that's worked for X and Y brand and so on. And then, well, if you ask ChatGPT, what should I test on my e-commerce store? It's probably going to spit out the same 100 test ideas that everybody's sharing. And those test ideas, I'm definitely not saying there are not good ideas. I'm sure many of those ideas produced fantastic results for the brands that tested them. The reality, though, is that the brand that tested that specific test idea had a very specific audience, context, and problem to solve through that test. And that's likely how they got results. In your case, well, let's think about how you're testing now. Do you truly have time to run 100 or 200 test ideas in the next couple months? No. And I'm sure you're familiar with the efforts that are required for running an A/B test. I'm talking about design, development, strategy, data analysis, proper tracking, and then everything else that surrounds it, right? So if we consider that every single test idea requires a lot of effort, well, we want to make sure, and you want to make sure, that every test idea you run has an optimal chance of producing results. And you'll want to make sure that, well, your resources are well invested. And the truth is, no one has the time to run 100 test ideas without a process. And that is the danger of copying those lists. Your website has its own unique challenges. Other websites have theirs. If you copy, strategies and tactics and tests from other brands, all that's happening really is you're trying to apply someone else's fix to someone else's problem to you, crossing fingers and hoping that works for you. In other words, you're playing the lottery, hoping that whatever you're doing is going to win. And what's going to happen is At one point, you'll likely lose patience. You'll likely find yourself a bit exhausted and annoyed, quite frankly, that you're spending all this time and resources on testing and nothing is moving the needle. And you may just say, well, you know what? A/B testing is not working for us. Now, if you're in this situation, if you've been there, if this is how you're currently feeling, or if you're looking to avoid that feeling, well, here is the secret. And the secret is not much of a secret because I've been talking about this stuff for the past 10 years. The secret is for a test idea to be worth testing and for a test idea to be worth even thinking about, it needs to be supported by as many data sources as possible that comes from your own set of data. So ultimately here, what you're seeing is that testing is supported by analytics. So what that means, and I'll dive into this in just a second because we've got a massive process for finding test ideas and you will learn every single step of it. You'll even be able to get this exact FigJam file by subscribing in the link in the comments below so you can go at your own pace through this methodology to create wins for your own brand. Now, let's get back to the testing trifecta, right? What ultimately we want to do is we want to make sure that every test ideas we run or that we decide to put money behind is supported by both quantitative analytics data that justifies its impact, but also its business case. And then on the flip side, at the end of the day, analytics are numbers. And sometimes, well, people just try to make decisions based on numbers. Makes sense. But the reality is when people are navigating your website, they're going through your funnel, they're abandoning their cart. Numbers can tell you how often that's happening. Can give you percentages, ratios, numbers, metrics, and so on. But a lot of what's truly happening when somebody is abandoning your cart or their cart is, well, it's happening up there. It's not happening in Shopify Analytics. It's not happening in Triple Whale. It's not happening in Google Analytics. It is happening in the customer's minds, in their head. And in order for us to be able to improve your funnel, well, we need to get inside your customers' heads in order to understand what they're thinking, what they're going through, so we can address it through different solutions. And then that's what testing is for. Testing is for testing the different solutions, not to identify the problem. But a lot of people are going at it the wrong way. So before we even get to the analytics part, which you will see right here, we're going to do a deep dive. And before we get into the human part, which we're going to get, well, yeah, right here. There are a couple things, obvious, foundational steps to finding test ideas and to conversion optimization that a lot of people are skipping on. And before we get to the exciting stuff, you need to make sure you've got those right. So let's actually start with those before going through the analytics and through the human side, so at least you know that you'll have your bases covered, and so you don't waste your time, finding fancy data sets and insights when you've got, a shaky foundation. The first step when you're looking to optimize your website is to do a heuristic analysis. Now, I always hesitate to recommend this because the way people look at heuristic analyses, which is essentially just doing a walkthrough of your website and figuring out what we think is working and what's not working. What happens is a lot of people are getting their test ideas directly from this, which is, not much better than copying test of 100 test ideas, right? What we're trying to do to get to the best test ideas is to take our gut feeling out of the equation and get the data to tell us what to test and in what order. Now, the heuristic analysis is just to give us some directions, but a lot of people don't do it. So essentially, what you'll want to do is you'll want to do a walkthrough of your website, but you want to do it in a systematic way. You'll want to look at it through 6 different lenses. So trust, persuasion, offer, relevancy, usability, and clarity. You'll want to map out your funnel, meaning your homepage, your collection pages, your product pages, any landing page, and any other page that's important to your site and that's driving revenue. And sure, you might be a marketer at this brand, you might be the founder, you might be a director or VP, right? So you'll be biased, and that's to be expected. But for a second, just go through each of those pages with one of the pillars as your lens. Let's start, for example, with trust. So on each of those pages, look at which elements are helping build customer confidence in the brand, in the product, in the purchase. Look at the areas where you might be lacking some of those. Or on the flip side, are there areas where you're doing too much to a point it almost feels like you're not really credible anymore? That's happened many times. Once you're done going through your funnel with trust, go with clarity. Go through the value propositions. Go through your product descriptions. Go through all of your copy. And think about this. What you're reading, if you didn't know about your product or didn't know about the brand, does it make sense? Is it clear? Would people understand what we mean by that? Next, you'll want to look at usability. As you're going through this process, well, sure, you know how to use your website, but is there at any point, a place and time where maybe you felt a bit confused or it felt clunky or something happened that, if you didn't know, if you didn't have the context, maybe a customer would have abandoned? Right? You will be surprised when you're going through the entire process how often you may stumble on those, especially as you're doing this consciously. Try all the filters, press all the buttons, go through all the nav links. Next, we want to look at persuasion. A lot of people think of this as like kind of the sexy thing. And sure, it is. It can be sexy, but it needs to be used, and it's just as important as every other step. Which is, what type of elements and language are you using that can leverage psychological triggers to influence decision making, right? Obviously here, there's a very real risk of overdoing urgency messaging and scarcity indicators and things like that will just cheapen your brand, make you look awful, and likely even hurt customer trust and confidence. But there is also a way of doing this in, maybe a more classy way. And look at your site if there's anything that helps push people above that initial resistance. Then once you're done with persuasion, look at your offer, right? Look at the deals, the incentives that you're presenting. One, well, do they make sense? But also, are you optimally using upsells, cross-sells, bundles? Is the pricing clear? Are the savings clear when they apply? What about the shipping thresholds? Do you have gift with purchase? Put yourself in your customer's shoes and think, is this offering something people want? Are we offering value? Are we providing the right incentives? And finally, you'll want to go through relevancy, right? So first, start with your landing pages and even a step before. Start with your ads. Click on your ads. Once you land on the website from the ad, does the messaging make sense? Is everything contextually relevant, right? You need to make sure that the journey from the ad to your website is, providing the same message. So you'll want to do that because this is probably one of the areas that most brands go wrong and they don't even realize because they have an ad agency doing their ads, then they're taking care of the website, and there's often a disconnect. So once you've done this will give you just a bit of an idea as to where to start. Still, don't have test ideas out of this. You may find bugs, which great, get those fixed ASAP. You don't want to test bug fixes. But it will give you an idea as to where you might want to start your research. If you have any suspicion that there's an area that's weakest, that's most confusing, it'll give you directionality. So once we've done with that, and we're done with the heuristic analysis, you've written down your findings, great. At least you probably have a clearer perspective on your website than you've had in a long time. But, then comes in the messaging. Right? one of the big dangers of competitor analyses is, well, what most brands do, which is what I'm telling you not to do. There's this tendency sometimes when we don't know what to change, what to test, what should be done. The grass is always greener on the other side. And what tends to happen is brands are going to look at competitors, they're going to find a good idea, then they're going to copy that idea, and then they're going to test it or implement it. And after running hundreds, at this point, thousands of A/B tests, I can guarantee you that I've seen many, many brands copy competing features or features from competitors that totally failed in an A/B test of theirs. One, you have no idea if your competitors know what they're doing. Something may look good, but also won't perform, right? So do not copy competitors. There is, however, strength in a competitor analysis. And the right way to do a competitor analysis is to do two things. One, to find the unique value proposition gaps. What gaps in messaging do we have between our brand and what our competitors are talking about on their website? But also, what information do they talk about? Right? So ultimately what you want to do is, knowing that you will have website visitors that will browse your competitor's website than your competitors, right? Well, you want to avoid sounding the same. And the goal of the competitor analysis is to understand where are the gaps. Where can you be more unique? Where can you be different? Not how can you be the same. There's enough sameness in this world where that's what you want to avoid. So try to find ultimately, how are your competitors talking about the solutions that the products create to the market? Do they have a unique take? Are you talking about it the same way? How are they addressing objections compared to your products? Can that provide inspiration, or are they targeting something entirely different? Are there objections they're not targeting that you could double down on and have a unique take on? Which audience are they talking about, right? Can you target a different segment and have, a bit of a blue ocean? Or are you all going for the same piece of bread? At the end of the day, there is a bit of a cheat sheet, a bit of a cheat, actually, that you can do. And what you'll want to do is to open Claude Research, or open, ChatGPT Deep Research. And what you'll want to do is, you can totally do this entire competitor analysis. Now, your prompt will have to be done the right way, but you'll want to give it your main competitors, but you'll also want to be very clear that you are trying to identify gaps, opportunities, differentiators between each brand. What are the differences between how each brand talks about their products and their UVPs? And you will get a multiple page report on, the competitive gaps that exist between you and your competitors. So that can be incredibly valuable, and you'll want to hold on to that, because then a little later on, once we do human research, we're going to identify what is important to your customers. And when we combine that with the opportunities identified in the competitor analysis, well, that's where money is made. Once you've done your competitor analysis, I can't believe I have to say this, but often it's forgotten. You'll want to do a technical analysis, like actually open your website on different browsers, or get a dev agency to do this. Test your website on different devices. Test it for speed. This is the Eisenberg's conversion pyramid. This has been around since the 2000s. And one of the things that it states is that before you focus on the persuasive elements when it comes to conversion optimization, or even the intuitive elements, you need to focus on the functional aspects, right? What it's worth, the fanciest, A/B tests, if people can't get to the checkout flow properly, or if, your font, your font's color is so light that your audience isn't able to read things properly, right? So make sure that everything is functional, accessible, matches ADA guidelines before you even think about doing intuitive and persuasive A/B tests. Now, okay, this is the foundation. You want to hold on to that, but you probably don't want to build some A/B test right off of this alone right now. Now is the time to truly dive into the analytics part of the testing trifecta, and then I'll show you how to use your findings from your analytics to then do human qualitative research that will allow you to pinpoint exactly why your users are doing what they're doing. And then we'll take that and turn it into a solid multi-million-dollar or not A/B test. Not all tests are winners, right? That's the point of experimentation. But we want to make sure we have the process for producing repeatable winners. So let's dive into the analytics. Now, I could do a whole course, a whole video, hours of analytics content. But let's just start with the basis and let's not overcomplicate anything. At the end of the day, the e-commerce funnel is pretty simple, right? You've got very straightforward linear stages. What that means is, well, generally you've got, your homepage or the landing page, and the goal when you get someone on your landing page, and a landing page could be a collection page, a landing page could be an actual landing page, a landing page could be your homepage, right? But your goal when people land on your website, your goal is to get them to a product. If they don't get to a product, they likely won't add to cart, right? So obviously there are some funnels that are a little shorter where, let's say, you can add to cart directly on a landing page. Well, this landing page is kind of the first step, and your next goal will be to get people to add to cart. But let's start here, right? We want people to go from the homepage or the landing page to your product page. And what this means is you want to identify what is the percentage of people that are going from the landing page to the product pages. Write that down. Build that funnel. You can do this through Google Analytics manually, or you can also use your GA data to build those reports into, easy to use Looker reports, for example. But once people are, then on the PDPs, you'll want to see how many people are or have seen a product page and are adding to cart. That is really the next step of the funnel. People land, people need to add to cart. Then after adding to cart, people need to proceed to checkout. And after they proceed to checkout, they need to then make the actual and complete the purchase. Now, what happens, and the problem with what I see brands do sometimes, is they'll just look at a bunch of test ideas and instead of taking the test ideas that are correcting a problem, they're just testing the test ideas that they feel would make the website look better or feel better. That is a bit of a, it's not the worst approach, but, every website has opportunities. Every website, has weaknesses. The fastest way to increase your online sales and make your funnel and convert more customers is to identify those areas of opportunities, those weaknesses, and improve them, right? So ultimately, you'll want to identify which part of your funnel is performing the weakest, which one is underperforming, and where if you'd increase, the percentage by 5% would generate potentially millions, right? Once you do that, now you want to remember a couple things. Averages lie. Yeah, averages truly lie. What that means is you could be looking at your entire funnel and everything might look okay. Every step, of course, it's not 100%, but we've got people adding and continuing through the flow at every step. But, sometimes averages lie, and what I mean by that is if you start looking at different segments, you may see that, hey, well, yeah, your returning users are performing really well through the funnel, but your new users, however, are truly underperforming. And what happens is when you look at the average, which is all segments combined, you don't see that the, extremely good performance from returning users is averaging out or hiding the fact that for new users, performance is underperforming. So what you want to do is you want to segment this funnel. You want to look at that funnel through different lenses. So first, look at that funnel, that exact same funnel I just walked you through, segment it by traffic sources. Look at people that are coming from paid traffic. Are there specific spots in the funnel where they are not converting versus other spots? Then look at your email traffic. Look at your different traffic sources, right? Don't even put paid all in the same bucket. Look at, let's say you've got linear, you've got Google, you've got Meta, you've got different paid traffic sources, right? Look at those individually, to the extent that you can track them. And you may notice that your challenges are different depending on the type of customer you're getting. So that's number one. Number two, of course, segment that funnel by device. The thing is, how people are performing on desktop isn't the same as how they're performing on mobile. And one word of warning, I've seen a lot of brands just really focus on mobile all the time. And true, we're in 2025. And yes, most of your traffic is likely mobile. But even if most of your traffic is only mobile, one thing people forget to check is how much of your sales are coming from mobile. Sure, a lot of brands we work with, 90% of their sales still come from mobile. But we've seen a lot of brands, and especially as the average order value goes up, the more we're going to see this, which is sometimes the majority of your traffic is mobile, but then over 50% or even 30% of your sales come from desktop. And that means that, people are likely using both devices. And if you're only optimizing for mobile, but 30% or 50% of your revenue is coming from desktop, well, that means you're ignoring 30 to 50% of what could be optimized. So make sure to really take a look at that closely. Not where's my traffic coming from, but where's my revenue coming from? Then you still want to look at this funnel, but also break down the highest converting path. So when you look down at that funnel, don't look at just what is weak. Look at your converters, right? You can create segments where you look at, just people who are converting and look at what they are doing. And ideally, break down this funnel into even more steps and secondary metrics and try to understand what events are happening. What are they clicking on? What's truly happening? Or what are the best converting visitors doing that leads to conversion? You may find some patterns here that are worth emphasizing or promoting that could, again, lead to higher conversions across the board. You also want to look at, and this is not in terms of segmentation, this is just in general when looking at your analytics, right? Look at where are people bouncing? Do you have ads, for example? And you'll want to segment this, right? You'll want to look at, hey, maybe my homepage or one of my landing pages bounce rate isn't too bad, but if I look at it by segment, I'll see that, it's not bouncing with email traffic, but most of my paid traffic is bouncing at 80%, right? And that means you're losing most people before they even read the page or interact with the page. So make sure you identify your pages with the highest bounce rates. And on the flip side, the highest exit rates. Which pages of your site are customers leaving your site through the most? It may point out to areas where they've been convinced that they don't want to buy from you, or they've gotten lost, something like that. So this is a very quick crash course, but every funnel that you have, and this is a great example. We've worked with Dr. Squatch for about 5 years, building their optimization program when they were a very small brand up to when they were doing, quite a bit of money. And in their case, for example, well, they have a subscription flow. They also have a bundle flow. So, treat these funnels as separate funnels as well. Deconstruct those funnels and all the steps that can happen in between. Identify the weak areas and the strong areas, and do everything that I just walked you through, segmentation, and so on. And this is how ultimately we were able to identify how to prioritize our A/B tests in that flow, which, we've run tons of tests in there. But you can't test everything at once. So where do we start? Well, we want to make sure that whatever we test next is what has the highest potential of making us the most money. So that means, well, we have to break down the funnel, identify which page is underperforming or where people are dropping off, and then we're going to start focusing on that page. And that's what we've done. And just to give you an idea, that's the approach we've taken, not just with their subscription flow, but with the entire website. And, it really paid off. Over the course of a couple of years, we were able to generate almost $10 million a year in additional revenue generated through the optimization program. And we've worked together for over 5 years. So, this is what the best brands in the game are doing. And this is what you need to be doing too. Now, this Google Analytics portion of things covers funnel performance. We at SplitBase have what we call our full business growth system for conversion optimization, which means, well, there isn't just funnel performance as part of optimization. There's also, profit optimization that's part of CRO. And to do that, if you're on Shopify, well, the data is better found in Shopify. And now Shopify has a fantastic AI sidekick tool that you can also use to ask questions and to get those reports for you. So a couple of things that you'll want to look at from a profit and financial standpoint that can help you increase average order value, lifetime value, decrease churn, and so on. Well, what is the first product that customers bought that led to the highest lifetime value and returning customer rate? So that is a question you can actually ask Shopify Sidekick. It's also a piece of data that you can easily get through your Shopify analytics reports. And the goal is to identify, if I'm driving new customers to my site, people who don't know us at all, what product should I advertise them that increases their chances of returning and the chances of having the highest lifetime value? And what you may find is your most popular product may not be the one that gets people coming back. Maybe you've got those hidden gems that once people buy, they're hooked on your brand and they want to come back. This is made to identify those products. And then once you learn from that, well, that's a great learning, because then you can potentially run an A/B test where you run different landing pages or different offers for new customers where you test different products. And obviously then you'll have to do cohort analyses to find ultimately what led to what. But you may find over time, depending on how many months you're using to measure your lifetime value, you may find at the end of the day that you had one product that led to significantly higher lifetime value and conversion rate that you should be using in the future to truly grow the brand and accelerate customer acquisition in a way that advantages you from a lifetime value point of view. Number two, this is very helpful for bundling. A lot of people over-rely on the AI features of their bundling, upselling, and cross-selling apps. Don't. Sometimes it's a bit random, and I've seen a lot of opportunities sometimes appear that did not appear in those apps. So also try to figure out, what are the most common pairs of products that are bought together? If you have products that are bought together very, very often, right, and they don't exist as a bundle, consider testing a pre-made bundle as a way to increase average order value. What are the products most often bought on the second purchase, right? This is also pretty interesting, because sometimes you've got an opportunity to reduce your payback period and get people to have a higher AOV right from the first purchase if you can anticipate what they would want on the second purchase. Now, it depends on your product category. Sometimes you have to think about this a bit differently, but especially if you've got a product where you sell accessories for it. What are people typically coming back for? Or maybe you have refills, right? If you're not offering a pack with refills, and people are going to come back a month later for refills, maybe there's a way for you to test different bundles. Maybe there's a way for you to, really incentivize or to combine what people are purchasing on their second purchase and really pushing that as an upsell or a cross-sell, right? The goal here is to improve your financial metrics, and sometimes I've seen this help, improve cash flow, because if you can increase AOV, reduce payback period just by having a higher upfront purchase in a way that still feels valuable to the customer, well, you win. So lots of test ideas can be generated from this financial data. And then also break down, and I know this may be a bit vague because there's a lot of things here that you can dive into, but look at what returning customers are buying and browsing versus what new customers are buying. And, sometimes the approach is that we're offering all the same upsells and cross-sells, and the merchandising is the same across the website. But sometimes you'll find returning customers, well, let's say you're selling barbecues, and then, you've promoted your barbecues and people have bought barbecues. Well, once they're going to come back on your website, do they really need to see or be promoted as a number one product, that same barbecue? They've already bought it. All your efforts and the real estate spent trying to convert that person who just bought that same barbecue, all that time and effort spent trying to get them to buy it again is just kind of wasted. Right? So think of, okay, what do returning customers want when they come to our website? What are they buying? Is there an opportunity here, for example, to take that real estate and utilize it and personalize it for returning customers so it makes their experience better, more relevant, and that you as a brand can make more money? Now, that's just a little bit of a highlight. And, like I said, we could spend hours on this going through analytics and Shopify data that you can look at. But right here, based on just your Shopify analytics and your Google Analytics data, you'll be able to come up with quite a few test ideas. Now, especially when you're finding potential test ideas for your web analytics analysis, so through Google Analytics, that's where, however, we'll fall into this situation, where analytics is only one part of the story supporting testing. And analytics gives you numbers, but your customers tells you why those numbers exist or why it's happening. So what happens is when you've identified the weak areas and you've really been able to dive deep into your analytics and you know what metrics are the weakest in which segments, what needs to be improved to generate the biggest uplifts. You want to understand, instead of just going A/B testing a bunch of things now, the truth is you're going to be crossing fingers, closing your eyes, and hoping that that dart hits the bullseye if you're just starting to test a lot of things. Because if you just test based on, I'm seeing problematic behaviors, and you run tests, you still have no idea what's causing those problematic behaviors. That's causing people to abandon, quit, and so on. So it's always valuable to get deeper before we go and spend all that time and money just building and running an A/B test, which on average will probably run for 3 to 4 weeks. So once we're done with this, then we can look at mouse tracking. By mouse tracking, I'm talking about scroll maps and click maps. Hotjar, heatmap.com, which is one of my favorites, all have great products for free. You can use Microsoft Clarity. But what you want to look at quickly when looking at scroll maps is, are people even scrolling down my pages, right? Here's a typical problem that you may encounter. Maybe you'll find that your product pages have an underperforming add to cart. Based on that, maybe you have very long product pages, and maybe you'll come up with the conclusion that one of your sections midway down the page isn't communicating the right information. So then you spend all that time rebuilding that part of the page, you test it, your test becomes inconclusive. Why? Well, or maybe loses. And this is a very common scenario. What could happen here is that, maybe the real problem was that people weren't even getting to that section. It wasn't that section you thought was problematic. It was that, just like this image, people abandoned before getting to your sections that would usually convert people, right? So what you want to look at when looking at scroll maps are these sudden changes in color. Now, on a home page, it's pretty common, right, that you're going to see exactly what you're seeing here, meaning, people land, they often go directly to the nav bar, so they're not going to scroll much. But let's say you're testing a listicle or a landing page where you don't even have a nav bar. Or even on product pages, right? You want to see, are people seeing the content? And especially now where it's trendy to have super long product pages, are people even seeing that information? You want to be careful with the color changes. Something very sudden means, that was a very sudden drop off where people stopped there and abandoned. I don't have an example here, but what you'll tend to see on some of the highest performing landing pages are very gradual gradients, if I can say that, where the color changes is very gradual. And that means that, there's no one point where most people are abandoning. It means people, it's normal that by the end of the page, there's maybe 20, 30 people left, 30% of people left. But that just means that typically, it's going to be a lot smoother. There's going to be more people staying on the page and reading your content. So that is one key thing to look for. Now, a couple tips if using scroll maps for landing pages. Well, after you get, let's say you build this new landing page, and after 100 or thousands of visits to your landing page, you can look at your scroll maps. And what happens is if you don't look at your scroll maps while running your test, you may wait 4 weeks for your test to conclude and then realize at the end of the 4 weeks that your test was a loser. It didn't outperform what you were testing it against. And the reason is because no one was actually scrolling past the hero section. You can and very much can identify those bad behaviors before your test is done, right? So as soon as you have a couple hundred people who's seen your landing page, look, are they even scrolling past a hero? Or, are they reading any of our landing page content? If they're not, if there's zero gradual or fading in the colors and everybody's abandoning at the hero, you may have a bounce problem. And it may mean that your ad or your landing page isn't relevant to people clicking on the ad. And it's kind of pointless at that point to wait another couple of weeks and to spend a bunch of money on ad traffic to a page people aren't reading. So what we typically do at Splitbase is if, in a couple days in a test, when we see that there's enough people that's seen the page, enough visitors, enough scrolls, right, we'll take a look and we're going to see, how good or bad the scroll behavior is. If we see no one scrolling, we'll stop the test where we're going to change the hero section and then we're going to restart everything. And sure, it's annoying to start a test, restart it, but it's much better than run 4 weeks of test, stop, run 4 weeks of tests. So you get to learn and make iterations a lot faster by doing this than if you don't do that. Now, the second thing that you can do is look at click maps, right? So here's an example from heatmap.com. This is what it typically looks like. There are a couple things you want to watch for. You want to look for elements that you think are important to the conversion, but that aren't getting clicks. Right? So, for example, you may have a carousel halfway down the page that you think people are going to scroll through, but then no one is clicking on the arrows or scrolling through it. Maybe it's not important if no one's using it. Maybe you have accordions or tabs somewhere on your page, but you're realizing, oh, those are so important, but no one's using it. Maybe it's a distraction. Maybe it's pointless, right? But you also want to look at what are people clicking on that aren't clickable. Do you have maybe images scattered around your product page or landing page and people are clicking on them hoping that they expand because they have a hard time seeing what's on them, but they're not clickable, right? Are there things that looks like buttons that people are clicking on but that isn't doing anything, right? You want to look at those behaviors and potentially address them as needed. And finally, a good tip is to use heatmap.com, which can draw a correlation between the clicks and the scrolls and the purchases. So you can see, for example, how many people clicked on this banner, ended up buying, what was their AOV, their revenue per user, and their conversion rate. When using a tool like heatmap.com that allows you to draw that correlation, you'll want to identify the elements that, yes, are valuable and that leads to conversions, great, but you'll also want to look at the elements that aren't valuable and that maybe are just wasting you space on your page, right? So there is an opportunity here to remove things to put more attention to what truly matters. And there's also an opportunity here to identify what truly matters and then put, well, more emphasis on them. Now, there are a couple of things that you'll want to be careful of when looking at heat maps or even scroll maps, which is don't over-optimize for just a few clicks, right? I get it. We're all impatient. We want to see facts and insights, but you need to have 50 plus hundreds or even thousands of clicks for the data to actually mean something and for you to be able to interpret them in a way that's statistically sound. So don't fall into the trap of seeing, 5 more, 6 more people click on one element and thinking that that element is a lot more important than the others, right? Or if there's, no one clicking on something that's really important, but you only got 10 clicks total on that section, well, maybe you'll want to wait for more data. So be careful not to overanalyze or overinterpret based on your sample sizes. Something I've seen often is sometimes people forget that no clicks is sometimes totally good as well. For example, if you have text-heavy sections or images, with a bunch of images, and they're not getting clicks, it doesn't mean that that section is not important or that it's not getting read, right? I'm not going to click on anything that I don't need to click on, generally. So you may have large sections where you see no interaction. It's just because people are potentially reading it, but you can't track, if people are truly reading it. You can only track clicks. So don't think that because something doesn't have clicks on it, that it's not important, unless it really requires people to click on it. So hope that makes sense. Now, just to give you an example and a case study here, we've worked with this supplement brand, and we wanted to look at the landing pages, and the goal was to optimize landing pages. And their main landing page, which was built by a very reputable landing page agency, but based on best practices, not truly based on their data, we ultimately looked at the performance of it, and we saw that, well, one, there was some messaging in the hero section that maybe wasn't truly resonating with the audience. We also saw that there were sections. There was a carousel midway down the page where it explained the effect of taking the supplements over the course of, I think, 90 days or something like that, or 6 months. And you had to click on arrows to scroll through that carousel. And that was important information for the brand and to understand the impact and the benefit of the products. We discovered a couple things. One, while very few people were actually clicking through this carousel. And second thing, well, the hero section, once we started testing different messaging, we did what I said earlier to quickly iterate the messaging based on the scroll rates before letting a test end. And that helped us go a lot faster with optimizing the performance. Ultimately, through these optimizations, we realized, hey, okay, well, the carousel that no one's clicking on, let's redesign it. Let's make it shorter so we don't require people to click through the benefits. Let's make sure everything's visible. The hero message, we got to a hero that led to a good scroll rate before we even finished our first test. And all of that led to a 16% increase in conversion rate, which for the brand meant over $100,000 in additional revenue. So think about this and think about what you could be doing by applying these strategies to your brand. Now, this is the quantitative part. Mouse tracking, we'll argue, can be qualitative or quantitative. I'd almost more say it's quantitative. But here's how to truly get into the minds of your customers to understand what they need, what they want, and what they maybe don't want. We're going to focus on the qualitative data analysis now. And I'm going to show you how to use website polls pre-purchase to identify pre-purchase objections. Now, this is one of my favorite things to do. You can do this through Hotjar, you can do this through Okendo, you can do this through VWO. But on a product page, ask people, were you able to find the information you were looking for? Then ask yes or ask no. And then if they say yes, you open a full box where people can mention what information they were looking for. You can also ask, is there anything holding you back from buying this product today? yes or no. If they say yes, they can fully type their responses. Another one of my favorite questions that I didn't put here is, what questions do you have about this product? And again, you always want to open a text box. Don't give multiple choices. Multiple choices are your preconceived notions of what people might answer. The real value often comes from what people are telling us that we don't even yet know about. So multiple choices are very important. And then usually the way you set it up is you can run those polls on specific pages, and then you can set specific triggers. So for example, you can set them up so after 30 seconds, that's when they appear and they become visible to your customers. This is very important. Make sure that they don't appear within the first seconds that people land on your page, because you can't ask them what questions they have about this product when they haven't even read a single line of text about this product. Right? So be careful. One of the tricks that we use to identify when to show the pop-up is to go in your Google Analytics data and look at the page where you want to display those polls and look at what's the average time spent on page. And you may notice that, let's say, people spend on average 45 seconds. That way, set your poll to right before that, maybe 40 seconds. And that is usually one of the best timings. So polls, incredibly helpful, to identify pre-purchase questions. One way we've used this was with INH Hair. INH Hair sells clip-on ponytails, and when we ran a poll, we were able to use those insights to increase their product page conversion rate by 26%. The way we've done that was by first asking what questions you have about this product. And a lot of people told us, I actually don't know how this product works. How does it clip on? How does it stay on? And it was something that, everyone thought was maybe a bit obvious. They even call them clip-on ponytails. But ultimately, we tested a bunch of variations, and then this is one of them, which we added a section on the product page, how to apply. Tie your hair into a ponytail, and those were GIFs, insert comb, wrap tail around base. And it provided a lot of clarity around this is how you use it. And ultimately, just being more clear on how to use it, adding more imagery, adding more text. This is today's version. It helped, this A/B test alone helped increase their product page conversion rate by 26%. So think about your brand. Think about your product. What are you not even thinking about that your customers may be wondering? You can find out about those and identify them through a poll. So that's a great way to get A/B test ideas. And again, you run those polls where? Well, on the pages you've identified were the weakest. So everything is connected. You start with the analytics, you then dive deeper with the research methods. Now, another way of diving into your customers' minds is through customer surveys. This is my absolute favorite research method. What you'll want to do is, and I'm not talking here about just like an attribution survey that's shown post-purchase. I'm talking here about an 8 to 11 question survey that you send to people who bought within the last, 45, 30, 60 days that have received their product. And you'll want to ask questions that are all open-ended. Things like, how is your life better thanks to our products? What's the one thing that nearly stopped you from buying from us? What can you tell us about yourself? These questions can reveal a lot of information about your customers that you never could have guessed and that you would never, ever have obtained through a multiple choice question. So just to walk you through exactly how we've used this, I'll show you an example of MoonPod where we've added 6 figures in additional monthly revenue and scale their meta ads and increase their cold traffic conversion rate through this customer survey. Now, the way we've used this survey was to figure out what to write on one of the landing pages we built. Well, actually, we've used this for every landing page and even, to optimize the copy and the messaging on their main pages. To give you an example, let's look at this page that we built during the pandemic. We asked, what made you buy this product? Or what can you tell us about yourself? And ultimately, people said that they were going through stressful times and they wanted to relax. So look at the headline, right? We wrote something that created curiosity. one. And second, something that was also relevant to what they were currently experiencing. So we have 5 reasons stressful times demand this anti-gravity beanbag. The curiosity, well, if we just called it a beanbag, it's just a beanbag. But what's an anti-gravity beanbag, right? And then on the second line, we wrote, whether you work on your MoonPod or use it to chill, it's the perfect place to banish stress. Well, if we look here at what people told us were their biggest use cases, well, they said work and chill as their 2 most common use cases. They also said being stressed quite a bit. So we addressed those 2 things directly in the subheadline. Then we wrote, MoonPod is a zero gravity beanbag chair that's made for the busy, the stressed, and the overwhelmed. Why is that? Because it helps you feel weightless and unburdened by the pressures you face every day. Again, repetition of desired outcomes and voice of customer, and then we included images that showed some of the use cases. People were wondering how they could sit on it, if it'd stay, put, so we added images that would confirm that. Then the points. We have 5 points. Each of those points were placed in an order of priority based on what people told us. So for example, use it however you want. Well, that's addressing one of the most frequently asked questions and use cases that people have mentioned both in the polls and in the customer surveys, right? So we talked here that you can sit, you can work, you can recline, you can even nap or watch a show. And we've even added buttons here to just show people different positions. Again, it's all addressing, and we didn't guess any of this. Nothing comes from gut feeling or best practices or experience. It really comes from what was said in the customer survey. And then people asked if it was heavy. People asked, how big it was, right? So we addressed that again in point number 2. And, a lot of people said that they live in apartments as well. So and a lot of people told us that they were parents. So we also wanted to address those things. So we said here, you can move your MoonPod wherever you want, whenever you want. It's only this, it doesn't weigh a lot, and it's light enough for a child to pick up and move around. So it really created this advantage. And this is also where the competitor analysis that we talked about earlier became helpful. What we did is we ultimately had identified in competitor analysis that one of the biggest complaints that customers had around competing products was that they were massive, they were heavy, they were annoying, their kids couldn't really move them around. So we really wanted to call that out. And we matched that with what customers were telling us about themselves, and ultimately that's what we got. Now, point number 3, it can offer relief from stress and anxiety. Again, it was one of the top benefits, and we use the exact words and voice that the customers were using. Here again, we've used the competitor analysis because none of the competing beanbag brands were talking about a beanbag as a way to get relief from stress and anxiety. So that created what we call a unique mechanism, something very unique for the brand, and another reason why buy from MoonPod. Finally, point number 4, this was a lesser mentioned thing, but a lot of people said that it could help them. It usually helped them reduce uncomfortable and painful pressure points. So we addressed that aspect as well. And finally, price is always an objection. You don't want to address price until people are convinced of the product and the value and the benefits. But, a lot of people said, I don't understand why it's so expensive. I didn't realize beanbags were so expensive. But then the reality is those people likely never truly shopped for beanbags before. Because when we looked at competing products are a lot more expensive. So we wanted to quickly just create that separation and address that objection. Again, the copy is full of voice of customer copy addressing use cases. And finally, we have our testimonial. And well, guess what? The testimonials are not random either. The reviews we picked are handpicked to address some of the biggest objections and that targeted personas. So people could relate with those and get answers to their questions. By doing this, this landing page helped MoonPod, add quite a bit of revenue, accelerate customer acquisition, and the same principle as the principle we use to build every single landing page for every single client at Splitbase. It's not based on guesses. It's not based on best practices. It's not based on what works for other brands. It's what your customers are saying and what is relevant to your brand. And this is how we create an experience that leads to conversions. Now, with that said, there are still other ways of getting customer feedback and, to better understand your customer. One of them is to dig through your chat logs and customer support tickets. Look at, the repeated objections and confusions. Look at the frequently asked questions sent to your support team or asked in chatbots or in your support tickets. Those can be a very valuable resource for identifying what should be put in an FAQ or what should be addressed directly on your website. Another thing you can be doing is to look at reviews. You can mine reviews, and by that, I mean your reviews, but you can also mine your competitors' reviews to better understand how are people talking about our competitors' products. When you mine reviews, right, you want to identify a couple things. First, you want to look for praises. The packaging was beautiful, fast shipping, feels softer than expected. You want to look on the flip side, the complaints. Smaller than I thought, color didn't match the photos, too complicated to assemble. So those can be great product improvement things. There's always potentially a way to address those complaints. The praises, you'll want to double down on those. The transformation is what you want to tell a story about. Finally got a good night's sleep. Now I feel confident wearing this. Help me save time every morning. Those are usually logical or emotional benefits that people report. And you want to use that to, help you understand how you should talk about your product in your ad copy, but also on your landing pages. Then the comparisons, right? So if people said, I used to buy this brand, but now I like this brand better, I switched from another brand, it gives context, but you can also use this content again as a way to capture people that might be in a similar situation. And then you want to look at motivators and use cases. So I bought this for a gift for my dad, for my mom. I needed something to travel. And again, this can help you shape your copy, both on the ad side, marketing side, and website, once you truly understand that. A pro tip, well, actually, before I give you a pro tip, let's talk about the things to be careful. And as strategists, experimenters, marketers, we all have our own biases. So don't put too much importance and attention on what people have only mentioned a couple times. And you want to make sure that you actually categorize your reviews properly. And this is the same thing when you run the polls and you run the customer surveys. And this is very important for customer surveys. What you'll want to do is you really don't want to just dump your results into an AI and say, analyze all my reviews or analyze my entire customer survey. The process for the survey is actually quite complex and still is a bit manual. But let's say for reviews, export your reviews into a CSV, convert that CSV into JSON because that's going to help the AI read it. Then use Claude because Claude retains a lot more context and is better at understanding context and nuances than ChatGPT is. And ask them to analyze the reviews based on the 5 factors listed on the left, right? Those. And then do this for specific products, do this for specific product categories, or you can even do this, just for your brand in general. But when it comes to customer surveys, just to address that, when it comes to customer surveys, it's a lot more complex. You want to go question by question. You don't want to give all the questions at once. You want to review how it buckets the different categories. To think about it, I think that is another video. Now, I'll give you an example here of how we've used the customer reviews combined with the surveys to increase Laura Geller's landing page conversion rate by 43%. It really helped them. The main goal when they came to us was, hey, we want to scale acquisition, but that's the biggest challenge. And that landing page helped them do just that. Ultimately, this landing page that you're seeing here is built the same way we've built MoonPod's landing page. So we addressed what people like the most, and people loved that they could, stop using heavy, cakey foundation. They wanted something that felt natural. They didn't want anything that settled into lines or caused breakouts. And ultimately, based on this customer feedback, based on the reviews and the surveys, we built this page here that addressed all those aspects. And yes, that led to a 43% increase in conversion rate. And believe it or not, and this is not typical, but it was on the first try. And this is the approach, right? If you just build a landing page based on gut feeling, how many things could you test? Hundreds. You could waste so much time testing a million things. You don't have that time. You don't have that money. You need to make money as quickly as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. And you can do that by following a process that helps you identify what you should test first and last, so your CRO efforts are focused. And this is what the testing trifecta does. Now, once you're done with the qualitative analysis, you can dive into a usability analysis, which is, to me, part of the qualitative. So to go through that quickly, first, well, look at session recordings. Session recordings are often misused. If you just sit down and try to watch a bunch of people going through your website, you're going to waste a lot of time. Identify the weakest areas, identify your hypotheses for why people might be abandoning, and then watch session recordings for those specific issues that you think are happening. Watch at least 100, and be careful, again, not to confirm your suspicions through your own biases, because it doesn't give you facts. It doesn't tell you why people are doing things. The only thing session recordings provide is that it shows you what people are doing. So look at obvious things, rage clicks. What are people clicking on or repeatedly that isn't working? When are people just scrolling aggressively? Or maybe they're looking for a piece of information. Look at the places where maybe they're having a hard time completing a form, or they're abandoning a form. Or just like with click maps, look at where are people clicking that may not be clickable. Session recordings can be great because we've helped. It was this $36 million direct-to-consumer fashion brand where the continue button wasn't appearing in their checkout flow. And they couldn't figure out why that was happening. They almost built an entire new flow, but ultimately we had identified that it was just a small bug. And we were able to catch that on session recordings. Once we caught that, we were able to identify the cause. We were able to quantify it, and we found that it was impacting about 15% of mobile orders. So for a while, they were losing 15% of their mobile orders, which we were able to recuperate and get that money back into their pocket through session recordings. Something else you can do when it comes to usability analysis is usability testing. You can use tools like usertesting.com, and what you'll want to do is you want to ask users to go through your funnel, give them specific tasks to achieve, and then usually they're going to talk at the same time as they're recording themselves, and you want to see where do they struggle, but when when you're asking them a survey at the end, ultimately they said they had no issues, right? What are the disconnects between what they're doing and what they're saying? This is incredibly valuable in subscription flows where people have to take a lot of actions or build bundles. But, same for any website, just any area of your website, have them go through the entire flow. And you may identify weaknesses that you didn't know existed. You can also use a 5-second test. A 5-second test is you take a screenshot of a portion of your site, you give it to a select group of users that you decide, and you show them that screenshot for 5 seconds. And based on that, they have to answer questions. You can use that. I love using that for a couple things, but mostly to test perception. How do people perceive us or the product within 5 seconds? Do they think we're cheap, expensive? What are visitors seeing first? Are there elements that they haven't seen? Is there anything that they're remembering? Is there anything that they've perceived first? Right? That can also help designers understand visual hierarchy or what could be potential issues with visual hierarchy. This is something you can even do as part of your design process before the website goes live. Another example or something else that you can do is card sorting, right? Sometimes if you have a lot of different product categories, you might be wondering, how do we group all of this? Instead of just testing a bunch of different ways to do your nav bar, you can put it in the hands of users and you give them a bunch of categories, a group of items, and you ask them how they would group things together. And that then helps you material to build an A/B test. So what you may realize that customers are thinking about their product categories very differently than you are internally. So that is, very helpful for identifying the gaps in how we think about grouping. One time we've done that led to great results is with Fontana Candle Company. They approached us because they wanted to really elevate their brand and their website, but they didn't feel like their message of being a very clean candle brand that could be trusted was communicated well. But they also have a lot of products, and we discovered that it took usually on average 4 clicks to get from the homepage to the best-selling candles. So we wanted to figure out across all product categories, how do we categorize and organize the information? So we used card sorting, session recordings, and usability tests to really identify how people were using the navigation, of course, combined with Google Analytics. And we were able to identify how users group navigation items. We were able to simplify navigation. And ultimately, it launched part of the new website. And the new website not only looked better, achieved the brand's goals, but it also increased conversion rate by 11.3%, really paving the way for the brand to achieve, their best growth year. So don't neglect usability tests. Now, once you've got all this data, you have to figure out what to synthesize, what are the patterns, and ultimately what you want to test. But at this point, you've got data points on the analytics side of things, you've got data points on the human side of things, which should give you a really clear picture of what's happening on your website and why it's happening. Now, your role is to build tests that are solutions to those problems or opportunities that you've identified. Then as you test, well, not all tests are going to be winners. There's actual statistics that shows that brands typically have 1 test that will win out of 7. The agency statistic is a little higher. CRO-specific agencies are going to get the best win rates. And ultimately, when you have an agency, a CRO agency that's able to do this entire process for you, well, at least you know that the test ideas are data-driven, follows a process, and it won't be wasting your time. It's with this type of test and process that brands like Dr. Squatch have grown to hundreds of millions. It's with this process that we've been successful at growing our clients, every single year for the past 10 years. So now this process is in your hands. You can request a download or access to this file using the link in the description. And now it's your turn to work through this process and generate some wins and unprecedented growth for your e-commerce brand. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for more of these videos.